up, everybody? This is Scott, otherwise known as MTV Plan B. Happy Tuesday. Hope everybody's recovering from Super Bowl Sunday. Today I've decided to give a preview of my daily rider bike. If you can see behind me, it's a bit dirty. So I did do some initial trail discovery yesterday. Trail's still a bit too wet to actually ride on. So today I'll do a walkthrough. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the components on the bicycle, why I chose them, and also maybe give you some insights into things that you may find beneficial in your riding as well. So without hesitation, let's start. So let's get started with the frame. This is a 2015 Santa Cruz 5010 model. It is a size medium frame. I purchased this bike consumer direct from a competitive cyclist. I think it's a subdivision of backcountry.com. They will, you can go on their website, you can buy frames or build the bike, and they will ship it to you in a box, and you have to just assemble a few parts like the derailleur, the handlebars, and some other things. So I did go with that method. I ordered the frame and then I built it out with the components of my choice. So now, having said that, it definitely didn't seem to be cheaper. It seemed to be actually more expensive. There's definitely not any economies of scale of a single consumer going out and sourcing all these parts from different places. So I think probably, you know, if you can get a good deal on a manufactured bike that you can buy off the showroom or order complete, you might get a better price. Now I will say this, if you go on competitivecyclist.com at the end of the year when they're doing their kind of clear out, you can definitely get up to 25% off. They kind of graduate it as they get later in the year. So you'll find some deep discounts on some of the frames and some of the leftover bikes there. So watch out. That's exactly what I did for this bike in 2015. I think it was around December time frame, or maybe even have been early January. They were doing the closeout, and I think I got 25% off this frame, so I had it shipped to me. So pretty cool. So what do you say we do some basic geometry, frame geometry? Let's just do some very basic stuff, because I'll probably be talking about some of these pieces during this kind of bike walkthrough. And you know, a lot of you probably already know this information. There's a ton of information on the interwebs that will explain everything about bike frame geometry, but I'll give you the quick spiel on it. So stay with me. So this rear triangle, so basically bikes are two triangles, right? So you have the front triangle, which is from the seat tube up, the top tube, and the down tube. So that's the front triangle, and then you have some kind of rear triangle. So basically the rear triangle has the chainstay. So I'll go around to the other side here. So the reason why they call it the chainstay is because it's the horizontal piece of frame that's right where the chain is, and then you have the seat stays, this angled piece here, because it connects the rear wheel basically to the frame of the bike. Now this has got rear suspension on it, so you would see this much more connected without linkage if you were looking at a hardtail. So if you look at a hardtail bike, then you can see the rear triangle here. Obviously it's very easy to see why they call it a seat stay, because it actually keeps the seat post up, so it's welded as part of the triangle is welded to the seat tube. So that's why they call that a seat stay, just on a different bike. This is a hardtail. Let's talk a little bit about suspension components. We'll start out with the front fork. So I'll just zoom in here. So some pretty beefy forks here. These are the Fox factory front forks, and they're 36 millimeters, so they're pretty beefy for this bike, given it's only 130 millimeters of travel. But I like stiff front ends, and these forks give me really good control over rebound and compression. So that's really important, especially if you want your tire contact patch on the ground all the time, and then when you're up in the air, you want to make sure you can get a good compression in the jump and a good solid rebound off of it. So those give you some controls of it. Really nice forks. Air spring type forks Single crown, obviously, this is just a trail bike. But you can get a whole lot of information on this fork online. There's tons of people that have a lot of it. And I think this is actually a 2016 or maybe I believe it's a 2017 year model fork, I believe. And it was one of the better years for Fox forks. So, Fox and RockShox were kind of trading spaces there for a while. So, having said that, enough for the front fork. Let's move to the rear suspension or the rear shock. And what I chose was the Fox Float X, and it has the Evol canister there, which is supposed to help equalize the pressure through the range of motion of the rear travel. And pretty good solid shock. I'll walk around to the other side and get close-ups of the settings on it. It has the 3 selector. I like to call it soft, firm, and firmer, which is basically those 3 positions. Then you have your rebound control, as you can see up here, where you can have a slow or faster rebound. And I got to be honest with you, I run a lot of, this is an air shock. I run a lot of air in this shock, actually. It says you should run it around the weight of the rider, and my weight can vary dramatically. It can go anywhere from 165 all the way up to 190 sometimes, and then with additional equipment and things, it can vary even greater. So I kind of pick a midpoint there, but I find I like my shock a little bit stiffer, so I'm running probably about 220 pounds of pressure in this rear shock. But it does the trick for me, so really like it. One thing I will tell you guys, if you have a Santa Cruz, I don't know if this happens on the carbon fiber model, but on the aluminum model in your linkage here, the top linkage, even the, let's see, I believe the bottom linkage may have the same thing, but in the linkages here, if you hear some creaks and you think it's the bottom bracket or you think it may be the headset, I would actually take these rear linkage off. There's these plastic colettes that these bolts kind of sit in, and take them out, and you will probably find that that's a source of popping or creaking in your frame. Lube them up as suggested by the manufacturer, put it back together, and you'll be good, depending on what your riding characteristics are. But definitely dirt, water, all those things that get in there kind of gunk that up a bit, so check that. All right, so that's it for suspension components. Like I said, this is this shock is actually a 7.875 by 2.25 mount. And I think the actual nominal travel on this thing is about 125 millimeters. I like to look at different people's sag settings. So this O-ring down here on the shock is a sag indicator. Basically, typically you want to set it anywhere between 25 and 30%. Some riders, the professional guys, they do a whole lot of tweaking to that. I like to set mine at somewhere around probably in between 25 and 30, but I like to look at these sag indicators because typically people leave them down, all the way down at some point. So if you take a look at this, you move the sag indicator to the bottom, and then you get on your bike, and when the fork compresses, it basically leaves the O-ring where it would be on this Kashima coated shaft here, and that will tell you. So if you compressed about that much, then you can look at the indication there of the O-ring and say, okay, well that's about 25% of the shock travel, right? And so your sag is now about 25%. Now the reason why I look at this on other people's bikes is because typically most people will leave that O-ring as is, and through normal riding, that O-ring will move up and down based on how much you compress the front fork. So think about me riding on the trail. When it compresses, this O-ring might travel all the way up to here, and this is where mine was. So you can see I have not bottomed out that fork since I last moved the O-ring. But I get a good chuckle out of it. It's kind of funny seeing where people's O-rings are. And if you've seen somebody that's bottomed out a shock, it'll be way up here. You can also see a lot of people that, probably riding bikes that will never go through your travel whatsoever. And if you're not using a majority of the travel on your fort or your rear shock, you're really not getting value out of it. So if you see something like that, or if you see somebody riding around like this all the time, then you know either they have the really stiff fork or they're not compressing the front fork a lot. So anyhow, just a observation there.